Do you want to have a more peaceful, more blessed life? I do. Let's talk about it. One of the things that helps us to be peaceful, helps us to be blessed in life, is if we have a positive confession about ourselves and about life. And it's amazing how often people, and I've been caught up in this myself, that we get dragged into this downward spiral of making negative comments in our minds. A lot of times this is self-talk. And we make negative comments in our minds about ourselves, like, oh, there you go again, you're always doing this. I can't believe you make so many mistakes, that kind of thing. Why do you always think this way? Why do you always act that way? And we can have a negative conversation going on about ourselves. That's very hurtful. It keeps us from being thankful. And we can have a negative conversation that goes on about life. That's easy to understand. Life is challenging. Life is tough. It's easy to find things that are wrong with life. There's so much wrong with it. So that's easy. But seriously, why is it that so many people are unthankful and kind of have a negative conversation going on about themselves and about life? And there are really three major things that stand against us as Christians. One of them is our sin nature. Every person is born with a sin nature that kind of drags them down in life. Another thing is the fallen nature of the world around us, just the general fallen nature of the world. And the third thing is ungodly and demonic people that are around us. And there's a lot of those. And so there's a lot of ungodly things going on around. So we have three things going on around us that would make our life more negative, more hurtful, more difficult, if you will, and thus produce a negative conversation. And with those three things, our sin nature, the fallen nature of the world, and evil people around us, what we don't need is to add a fourth thing, that is ourselves. We don't need to add our negative conversation to those three things because they're already making life tough enough. Let's take a closer look at these three things and see what the Bible says about them. So first, we're going to examine the sin nature. And in doing this, there's some great truths buried in Romans chapter 7 that we want to mine. So we're going to start in Romans chapter 7, verse 14. And it starts out with the Apostle Paul writing, he says, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I'm of the flesh, having been sold as a slave to sin." The law is spiritual. And what does this mean? God gave the law so we would know how to behave if we're going to be blessed and godly, like don't steal, don't lie, don't covet. These kind of things, they help us, they help guide us so that we're more blessed in life, so that we're not caught up in a downward spiral of sin. But then we can't do it. We have all these great rules and regulations and we can't do them. And when Paul addresses this, and he says, why is that? I've been sold as a slave to sin. And that's our sin nature. And who sold us? Adam did. When Adam sided with the devil against God and people got a sin nature. And then what happens as a result of that? The Apostle Paul is like the rest of us. And he says, "For I do not understand my own actions. For I'm not practicing what I want, but I'm doing the very thing I hate." Yeah, it happens in my life a lot, maybe yours too. Verse 17, "So now it's no longer I who acts this way, but sin living in me." And what does he mean by this here? What does he mean it's no longer I who acts this way? And we'll see this, go down to verse 21 of Romans 7. He says, "So I discovered this law, that while I am wanting to do good, evil is present with me." Verse 22, "For I delight in the law of God so far as my inner self is concerned." What is being pointed out here? What's going on here in Romans? Why is there an I versus a sin in me? And the answer is that God didn't create us with sin nature. The me, that's John Schoenheit, the me that talks to myself, my inner self, it has desires, it has goals, it has inspirations. I do. You do too. Like, for example, I want to eat better. I want to exercise. I want to pray more often. I want to do these things. Some of them I'm pretty successful at. Some of them I'm not. Why not? Because of my sin nature. And so what's going on here is Paul is talking about the fight that goes on, like I say. Why are so many people negative all the time? Why are people so unthankful? Why do people have a negative conversation going on inside them, or they complain? And the answer is the I, their inner self, may not want to, but their sin nature drags them down in that direction. And so it becomes very important. Here's the Apostle Paul. He says, "Wretched man that I am," because I'm frustrated. I can't do what I want to do. Wretched man that I am. Who will rescue me out of this body of death? And of course, the answer to that is Jesus Christ will. But here we have in Romans 7, one of the three great things that we wrestle with, which is our sin nature. And we really do have to wrestle with it. And if my inner self is going to win, then I have to listen to what I'm saying. And I have to make up my mind that I'm not going to have an internal conversation complaining about myself, denigrating myself, pointing out all of the mistakes I make. You just did it again, Schoenheit. You just did it again, Schoenheit. I don't need that. It's not the way to be blessed. It's not the way to be peaceful. It's certainly not the way to be thankful in life. But it does happen. But we know we can stop it. Our inner self can just say, cut it out. Don't talk that way. And we've got to cut that off. Now, another problem is the fallen world around us. I mean, life is difficult. Life is just plain difficult just because of the fallen world. I mean, I run into this with my computer. I'm not very good at computers, and it amazes me. I'll work all day on my computer and I'll turn it off at night and I'll go home and the computer will have worked perfectly. I'll turn it on the next morning and it won't work. And I'm completely just, what? How? What happened? And then I'm confused. I get anxious, and you deal, or, you go out to start your car one morning and it worked great yesterday, but now it doesn't work. Or you plan a nice outdoor picnic and you spend all the money on the supplies and you get all the guests and everything is getting ready, and then a big rain cloud comes up out of nowhere when the weatherman didn't say it was going to come. And this kind of thing is happening all the time. There's stuff in the world that catches us off guard. For example, you went to bed feeling great, you wake up and you're sore, your throat is sore, or your nose is running, or you're sick in some other way. Where did that come from? Why did it come on so fast? Why did it come on without warning? Why did it happen when it did? See, there are these things that are just a product of the fallen world. They're not even due to our sin nature, they're just due to the fallen world. And they cause problems. And so what happens is they happen so frequently in life, these difficulties happen so frequently in life that without really even thinking about it, we become unthankful. We have a negative conversation. You pull into a parking lot and you can't find a space, and here we go again. I can never find a parking space when I want one. Well, that's not true. But that's the kind of conversation that goes on. If you want to be more blessed, if I want to be more blessed, more peaceful, more thankful, we've got to listen to ourselves, catch that negative conversation and cut it off. We got to cut it off and just say, no, I'm not going to talk that way. I'm not going to think that way. That's not the way I'm going to live. I'm going to have a positive confession, and I'm going to be thankful. And okay, it's too bad that the time that I wanted to shop, it seems like everybody else in town wanted to shop, and there aren't any spaces right now. But that's not a curse of God. You'll find a space, I'll find a space. Things like that will work out, and we can be thankful about it. And it's amazing how, like, in that situation, let's say, and there's not a space, if you just take it at face value and say, well, right now there's a lot of people shopping and there's not a space, but I'm glad I'm healthy and I'm thankful my car's working, and I know that if I drive around here for a couple more minutes, there'll be a space, and sure enough, there will be. The interesting thing is that the space opens up in a couple minutes, whether you're complaining and gripey and all upset, or whether you're blessed and peaceful and thankful. That time doesn't change. So being unthankful and gripey and complaining and having that internal conversation, and sometimes an external conversation as you complain to anybody who's with you, it doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. All it does is make you miserable and make you less thankful, which is like a feedback loop. And eventually we become more unthankful all the time, and life just kind of, instead of being a blessing that we're alive, that we breathe, that we get to represent God on earth, that we get to look forward to everlasting life, instead life becomes this burden. And God didn't design life to be a burden, but so many times it's a burden because we're making it a burden. Instead of watching how we say, watching how we think about life, and dealing with it from a positive, thankful position. The Bible does tell us to be thankful. And of course, then there are evil people that make life difficult too. And that's not a surprise. Evil people can make our life difficult. And what's the answer to this? I love with Jeremiah. And Jeremiah lived in a very, very difficult time. Very difficult time. Lots of idolatry, lots of sin, lots of problems. The Babylonians were knocking at the gate. There were loads of problems. And Jeremiah complained to God in chapter 12 of Jeremiah, verse 1. He says, "You're righteous, Yahweh, when I bring a case against you. Yet I would speak to you about your justice. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why are all those who deal in treachery at ease?" In other words, the people that are evil, they seem to be doing so well, and I'm doing so terribly. How can that be? And God here, that was verse 1. Now God's going to answer in verse 5. And I love the way God answers. It's so profound. God doesn't say, "Jeremiah, I know there's a lot of evil people." God doesn't go into a big explanation about how evil people make life difficult or anything like that. Here's what God says to Jeremiah in Jeremiah 12:5. He says, "If you've run with the footmen and they have wearied you, then how can you compete against horses? And if you feel secure in a land of peace, yet how will you do in the thickets of Jordan?" And what God is saying here is, look, Jeremiah, life can be tough, but really it isn't as tough as it could be. If you've run with a footman and you're wearied, life isn't as tough as it could be. Life could be as tough as trying to keep up with horses. You're in a flat level area, but what if you were by the thickets of Jordan? What if things really got tough in your life? And so what God says to Jeremiah basically is, quit complaining. Things could get worse. Yeah, okay, you don't like things. Yeah, okay, things are difficult, but things could get worse. So you just develop a thankful attitude. I love that. And then Jeremiah, how did he handle things? In chapter 15, verse 16, it says, what had happened was the word of God, the scrolls of God had been kept away by evil kings. And so they were found under the reign of Josiah, a godly king. And Jeremiah lived during that time period. And so in Jeremiah 15:16, he says, "Your words were found." Can you imagine? The scrolls of God, they'd been gone, they'd been lost. And all of a sudden, the word of God was discovered. And here's Jeremiah the prophet. "Your words were found and I ate them." He said, he just took them in. I ate them. "And your words became to me a joy and the rejoicing of my heart. For I am called by your name, O Yahweh, God of armies." By being called by your name means I'm a follower of you. And he says, these words became the rejoicing of my heart. Why? Because they're true words. They're God's words. And they contain hope that there's going to be a better time. There's going to be a better day. There's going to be a better life. And so Jeremiah says, these words became the joy of my heart. And then what did he have to do? Verse 17, he needed to be alone. He couldn't be around all those evil people all the time because they did bring him down. Just like they can bring me down, they can bring you down. So Jeremiah in chapter 15, verse 17 says, "I didn't sit in the assembly of those who make merry, nor rejoice. I sat alone because of your hand." And sometimes we do need to pull away from evil, wicked people. And thankfully, there's still lots of Christians on the face of the earth who want to live godly lives that we can fellowship with. And that's really important. So if you and I want to live more blessed lives, be more peaceful, just be happier, it helps if we're not always talking about what's wrong. It helps if we don't have an internal conversation that is against ourselves. That it helps if we're thankful and positive and train ourselves to see the good in a situation and not just look around for the bad and then live in it like our life is terrible, I hate this life. We don't want to live there. We want to be, God, thank you for saving me. Thank you for the hope that you give me. Thank you for all the things in my life that work out. If we do that, we'll be more peaceful and more blessed. Hey, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Click the subscribe button below to follow us. And also hit the notification bell so that you're notified when new videos are posted. And please check out our website for additional resources at spiritandtruthonline.org. And if you were blessed by this video, please consider donating to our work. Just click the donate button. And may God bless you as you grow in your walk with the Lord.